So you can quantify an investment in, paid advertising because you see how many
Mm-hmm.
clicks you get on your website. You can see that funnel. And so people are like, I'm going to pay for this all day because I can measure it. I can
Mm-hmm.
see the impact of it. And business owners tend to underinvest in things where they cannot quantify the ROI. And these are the types of things that we're talking about, where it is very difficult to quantify an ROI on our like monetary spend or our time investment. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm a firm believer that relationships certainly do keep things going and create momentum and provide a lot of opportunity. But it's so hard to measure.
I mean, we got someone saw my LinkedIn post about the fall bash. It was a perfect client alignment. And they're like, "Hey, I thought your company name was cool and you guys seem like you know what you're doing." So they reached out and didn't expect that. And it was a really great conversation.
You had me in cackles about 5 minutes ago, and we won't get into details on that, but here we are for episode 8.
I'm funny, Roman. What can I say?
You have moments. You have moments, and I couldn't control myself on the last one. But here we are, episode 8, getting to talk about one of my favorite subjects in that community, industry involvement, and diving into that world.
Yes. Oh, and you know what we didn't brainstorm about before this episode is our full send fall bash last week.
Holy cow, talk about community. And I'm repping my first Descents hat right now. We brought, what, close to 150 people together to celebrate community, to support a good cause. That was freaking awesome.
So heartwarming. It was just exceeded all of my expectations.
I was reduced to tears twice. Like, not like full, alligator
Mhm,
tears,
mhm.
but hearing the stories of the people whose lives were impacted, like, that got me. And then after the fact, when I was driving home, just like overwhelmed with gratitude of how many people were willing to come out and support.
Well, I think we should just give a little highlight of the event, why we did it, what it was for, and the night recap.
Yeah. So in June of this year, we were like, let's have a party. Let's plan it in 3 weeks. And we decided to put it off a little bit and ended up hosting our first annual Full Send Fall Bash on September 28th. And the whole intent behind that was really supporting a great cause and getting people together. There was no agenda beyond let's have a good time, let's build relationships, and let's support a cause that's important to us that aligns with our mission and values. And like that was really the crux of it.
Which I loved, that there was no other purpose other than getting together and supporting a good cause, because I think it really allowed people to come to the event, obviously donate if they could, but just talk, not, having ulterior motives or, having other purpose other than just getting to know the people you're around. And I think it was a lot of people really enjoyed that because there was no other purpose to the get together. Obviously, it
Yeah.
was nice to have live music with the sleigh band. Loved the live bluegrass, great choice. And then some free pizza with the food truck. But it was just very easy. And I think with this remote world that we live in, we're kind of missing that impromptu, just easy connection that is missing in a lot of ways.
Yeah, and having people connect in a way that's a little bit different. That's
Mhm.
not your standard stuffy networking event. And one of the things we got a lot of good feedback on was that on the name tags of people coming in, instead of writing their name on their name tag, they would write whatever it is that's full send to them. So, what makes you come alive? What brings you joy? And so it was so cool seeing people have like gardening, summer solstice, mountain biking, skiing, like all these unique things that makes them feel alive, and use
Mhm.
that as a conversation starter when meeting new people.
Education, personal health and wellness.
Hmm.
Um, Rads was bribing his children. There's just a wide variety. And you're right, it had a really great element of connection to just have that conversation and start it off the bat rather than, hey, I'm so and so.
Maybe at the end of the episode, we'll drop the sizzle reel of the fall bash so that people can check that out if they want to.
It was so fun. And First Ascents, we partnered with them. That was, Roman, a great choice on your part. They host various outdoor get-togethers, kayaking, rock climbing, just different outdoor adventures for people who have been diagnosed with cancer or MS. And it costs about $2,500 for a single week trip to host for an individual. And we raised just about $5,000. So we were able to raise 2 trips for people. And hearing the First Ascents team speak and, send gratitude to the party, also brought a lot of us to tears. And they were very grateful, and it just made it overall very rewarding and impactful for us.
Yeah, not to mention, like, we do accounting for work. We're not in the business
Yeah.
of raising money for nonprofits, like it's just so cool to see us being able to invest in things like that and to give back to organizations like First Ascents, whose mission is to provide healing through adventure. Like, that is just so spot on with our ethos, and I just I love it so much.
It was amazing. Can't wait to see how this evolves for us as a firm each year, and committing to doing something like this every year in our Full Send bash in some capacity, because community is really important to us. And that's kind of the theme of this episode. And you mentioned a little bit of, we are accountants, and typically speaking, a community or events or just like that extrovert style is not always commonplace for our people. So we want to hit on this episode just things that we're doing in the community, groups that we're a part of in the accounting community, um, just different findings that we found kind of in this space of accountants in firm ownership versus in-house accounting and working at a company. So Roman, why don't you start with your thoughts on just your involvement so far, and like what you're really delving into and what you really like in the community space?
Yeah, definitely. So launching this, and 5 years prior, my career has been largely community business development, relationship centric, and so I knew that that was a big part of personal and professional growth and development when launching Full Send. And one of my first moves, if you want to call it, was to just reach out to other firm owners and people who I noticed online were building community and seemed to have good relationships. And so started early on by just trying to figure out who's doing what and how to get plugged in. And
Did you
it
mostly use LinkedIn for that? Was that your primary place, or?
LinkedIn was the first step for me, is send a message to somebody who is doing something cool and something that I admire and aspire to be. And ultimately, like, through the lens of the worst thing that could possibly happen is that they don't respond. And if they don't respond, okay, cool. I'm going to keep doing that with other folks in other industries. Yeah, LinkedIn was the primary facilitator.
So, as of today, what are some of the communities that you're a part of? And, just tell our listeners.
Yeah. Yeah. So from a community perspective today, it varies widely from industry specific. Like, I started a venture capital mastermind group that we meet monthly, and it's a small group, 5 to 6 people every month. And we've been doing that for about 2.5, 3 years now. But that's been really helpful just to understand what's happening in the market, get perspective from investors and other folks that are part of this group, to help us better serve our clients. And then on a few other fronts, we have a large text thread, a few Slack communities of other firm owners that now have become quite good friends that are constantly, I mean, 100 messages a day, sharing ideas and new technology, and sharing issues or people that they come across that they can't hire but believe would be a good fit for other firm owners. Things like that start to bubble up pretty quickly when you're able to participate in these types of settings.
Do you feel like in those accountant networks, there's just a sense of openness or transparency that is new to you, or have you found groups like this similar in the past?
Yeah, so when I started last year, I joined Future Firm, which is Ryan Lazanis's group. There are several similar, so Realize, Jason Statt's group, Thrival. There are a variety of, you got EO, YPO, you name
Mm-hmm.
it, for entrepreneurs. And they all operate very differently. What I prefer the smaller group setting and dynamic because of that vulnerability and that ability to kind of open up about things that may be challenging that you wouldn't want to talk about in a large group setting. And so you could get whatever flavor you want. But for
Mm-hmm.
me, having that smaller group in a lot of ways was much more impactful earlier on.
So you have these interpersonal groups, kind of weekly, impromptu, different types. What about hitting on PAC or partner advisory
Mm.
councils? How are you approaching different opportunities in that space?
It's interesting. We've said before, maybe in our first episode, when making decisions on our time and how our time is being spent, if it's not a hell yes, it's a no. And so that's really the lens that we look through in order to understand whether or not we should participate in various partner advisory councils. And I think when I think about partner advisory councils with, tech companies, with vendors, we look at it through the lens of how will this impact us personally? Our personal involvement in the industry. How will it impact the firm in terms of what we're able to deliver to clients, and how does that improve the outcome for clients? But then also, broadly speaking, what impact can we start to create on the industry?
Mm-hmm.
And so we're very intentional about spending time in places where we can accomplish those things.
Which is hard, right? Like you and I, we have check-ins periodically, at least once a quarter, if not sooner, on our goals and getting a pulse on that. And the whole 2023 has been which partner advisory councils do we want to go after? Which ones are valuable to us as a firm and individually? And which ones should we pass on because it really doesn't fit and we're just not able to commit in a capacity that's beneficial both for the advisory council and for our own sake and our other outside responsibilities that we have running the firm. And it's a conscious decision. And you and I talk about it each time, like, hey, I have this interest. Should I go here? What does that mean? And we're
Mm-hmm.
kind of bouncing ideas off of each other constantly for different opportunities.
Yeah, and it's not the kind of thing where it's just like this open door to step in all these opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
It all starts with developing relationships first, and then those doors start to open, and it's a matter of evaluating what makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like we've positioned ourselves well to be able to have those more formal type of relationships with vendors and other groups and market, which has been really fascinating to see.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've been grateful for you and the relationships that you have built just in, a year. It's not an incredible long time, but you have made quite a wave in the industry and people want to know you. And you've been also very open to me and saying, hey, you should meet Stacey or you should introduce me to whoever it is in the space. So I'm very grateful for that because has been more challenging for me, not more challenging, but it's been challenging for me since it's just such a new venture, right? You've been doing some form of client services your whole career, starting in
Yeah.
audit, going to different firms. And whereas I've started my whole career in industry, always working in a company. And while I consider myself an extrovert, this form of connecting and just networking is not a way I've been running my career for the past 10 years. So it's different for me. And I'm really grateful that, you're built together, go farther, and we're in this together. Um, at the same time, I want to hit on the fact that moving my career from industry, being in a controller seat, into firm ownership and cast practice has been so instrumental in, I think, my overall satisfaction and happiness in what I'm doing day in and day out.
Hmm.
And that's because, when you're in a company and, the company is a startup and it's growing a software or it's growing a product, the primary goals of that company is to make that product better, ship that product faster, and the accounting of that product it's a second thought. Of course, it's important to have clean books and have that function running well, but it's not at the forefront of what the company's objectives are. So now, having shifted into firm ownership, not only where our primary service is to do accounting and finance for clients, there's a whole network of people who do the same exact thing as me. And that has been so eye-opening to be able to relate to so many different people with the challenges and excitement that I face day in and day out. I've never experienced that before.
It, but
And
that story resonates with a lot of people, I'm sure.
I hope, and I think, we're hiring our first US based employee next week. And I know that Kathy is going to love it the same way that I do, because that's also, we've shared in this frustration before. We've always shared in this um, just challenge that accounting is always an afterthought. There's no budget to improve accounting. There's no accolade for finishing something faster or making something more efficient, because it's just typically not understood more broadly within a company of what we do day in and day out. Whereas if I go to this community of our people, of these Slack channels I'm a part of LinkedIn, just talking with people in different peer groups, I can say I did X, Y, and Z, and they get it. And it's a shared
Um,
experience.
and you know what's funny is that the bar is pretty low for accountants. And I don't mean that in a way that like anybody can do it, but truly, to step like one half step outside of your comfort zone and put yourself out there just a little bit more than accountants naturally do, you can
Mm-hmm.
start to open up these doors through relationships that you may not have ever thought possible. So when you allude to working as an industry accountant for a company whose mission is outside of the realm of the actual accounting function, there's really not a lot that people think about outside of, hey, I need to get this reconciliation done, I need to get this work product
Yeah.
completed, and
Mm-hmm.
not thinking of how people outside of their innate function can support them in their growth. And so now we're trying to flip that script. And so when we have a new employee come on board, we are now responsible for not only developing that community externally to create access and opportunity for the team, but also internally too.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to create that supportive environment where somebody feels like they're making a difference, their work is valuable, because even in firm life it could be really easy to be an associate, a manager, and just feel like, I'm just checking the box, and we want to
Mm-hmm.
avoid that at all costs.
Mm-hmm. Fair. We're going to face similar challenges of any human doing
Yeah.
somewhat repetitive work in by nature. Um, but I just I feel like I've found this community that I've been missing, but I didn't know I was missing it.
Isn't that wild? I mean, when we were talking about you coming on board earlier this year, January, February timeframe, this, like what we're talking about today, really wasn't even a part of that conversation. Like we had some conversation of like, hey, like starting to meet people and build community, but like where we're at today wasn't even an idea in
Mm-hmm.
January. And now like you're sitting on a partner advisory council and getting into these communities, and I'm like, I'm so glad she likes this.
Yeah, that wasn't even on my radar at
Yeah.
all. I mean, naturally, I do like to get involved as much as I can and be valuable. But I was most excited just about building our firm and building it efficiently and building it to scale. But I didn't realize that there are hundreds of other people who have done this same thing before, and they have learning experiences and they have failures and they have successes, and they're most of the time willing to share those stories with others. And there's forums like QuickBooks Connect, like Scaling New Heights, and different events that we can go to get these firsthand stories and experiences. And it, to me, it just all boils down to this connectivity and connection in our workspace.
Hmm.
Um, and it's hard in a remote world. Even if you are, in person, it's not always so focused on connection of what we experience day in and day out. And I just feel really, really grateful to have found my way here and to be doing this every day.
Yeah, and it's interesting, the conference circuit, thinking about events that are happening, participating in those, and starting to speak at those types of events. One of the things that I've kind of realized over the years is that whenever I participate in events like that, it is almost never about the programming and the sessions and the lectures that I can listen to. Like, I might learn something or two, but it's all about the people. It's
Mm-hmm.
about the connections and the relationships that you develop out, like, during that time, that then you can take after the fact and now call up that person and say, hey, here's what I'm going through. Do you have any thoughts? Have you been through this before? Can you help talk me through this issue that I'm facing? And those
Yep.
relationships take time to develop. You can't do that overnight. But the worst thing that somebody can say is, hey, sorry, I don't have the time, or not respond.
Exactly. And it's the same thing in the founder space or the startup space, right? You have the Y Combinators, you have the tech stars, and it's everyone needs that community of feeling involved and feeling that it's a shared experience. So I think it if you don't have that, talk to some people, send some LinkedIn messages to try to build that community to make work not feel so isolating, because it can be fun and we're spending a
Yeah.
lot of our lives doing this type of stuff. So if we can make it just a little bit better and a little bit happier, we should do it.
So I'll give you a great example. When I was at Scaling New Heights in Chicago this year, I met a gentleman by the name of Jason Treadwell. And Jason was in a session that both of us were attending. Kristen Keats was putting on a session. It was great, and I was like, I'm gonna go support Kristen because I really like what she's doing. And it was a phenomenal session about productization. And I posed a question in this session just to hear her thoughts around productization, how to accomplish it well. And after the session, Jason then came up to me and he was like, "Hey man, like, I'm going through some of these similar problems. Like, would love to connect further." And we chatted for maybe 30 minutes there at the event, but then swap numbers. And I just told him, like, hey, like, reach out anytime. Happy to talk further on these things. And we've been chatting via text since that event and talking about what he's going through, and the issues that he's facing, and starting to connect to other people. And all it took was a conversation
Mhm.
after a session. And it's just so cool to see that develop. And now, hopefully, at the next conference I go to, or next time I'm in Chicago, I'm going to reach out to Jason and say, hey, let's grab a lunch. Like, would love to see you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it it's beneficial on both sides. You don't have to be the person always, feeling like you're taking value from someone else. Giving value to someone is just as valuable as receiving it. And I think there's a common misconception of give versus take, but oftentimes mentorship and being on the giving side is just as rewarding as the receiving side.
There's a balance, right? Like, the
Yeah,
first, even
definitely.
now, I feel like I'm taking far more from the community than giving back to it. And then folks like Jason are like, "Hey, man, you've been so helpful," and I'm like, I'm just kind of sharing my experience with you, and I don't feel like I'm helping that much. But we've had some great dialogue, and I've been learning from him the stuff that he's participating in, and, like,
Mhm.
it's freaking cool.
So the flip side of all of this community involvement is just overcommitment. And you're becoming more of a prominent voice on LinkedIn. We talked a lot about just reach out to someone on LinkedIn. Worst thing is they don't respond. There's going to come a time when you can't physically keep up with all of the messages, all of the speaking opportunities, all of the advisory council invites. When you think about that, like, future plan, or even today, right? Because there are some bits of pressures of overcommitment. Like, what to you is most valuable in saying yes?
It's Man, that is an interesting question, because I mean, today, even LinkedIn volume, I'm on LinkedIn a lot, and there's 20 messages a day in addition to email and client service and meetings and all that stuff. And
Mhm.
so volume gets high. But in terms of the parameters to say yes to a meeting, even much less a larger scale annual commitment, I'm kind of walking it through the lens of, does this help the firm? Does this help the clients? Does it help the team? And if it checks one of those boxes, then absolutely we'll take that meeting. But other times there may be an indirect correlation to one of those things where there may not be an immediate benefit, but
Hmm.
um, building relationships, with anybody can be super valuable. And so I always want to be cognizant of that while also protecting time to make sure that our clients are being serviced really well. And so there's no magic formula, but I have told a number of folks, particularly on the vendor side, hey, I'd love to connect, but we're just in a really busy spot right now. We're working through a few initiatives that don't align with whatever the
Hmm.
content of the meeting is, and so we're gonna have to push it back for a month, 2 months, and meet later.
Yeah, it's hard because the person, the human in you wants to give everyone the time of day and give them that, you know, everyone deserves a conversation. But we only have so many hours in a day. And, we're trying to also keep our families happy, keep our work completed and clients happy. So I imagine it's going to be a constant battle of figuring out, like, how do we balance that properly as we grow?
You brought up a good point, because the one thing I didn't mention of, like, hey, it'll make the way I process meetings and requests, it's firm, team, community. I can't remember what order I put those in,
Clients,
but
I think, yeah.
clients, yes, thank you. But family is above all of those things.
Hmm.
And I'm not going to jeopardize the time that I have with my 2-year-old and 2-month-old because I'm going to go take a meeting. Like, that's just not going to happen. And you and I have talked a lot about these, boundaries between work and life, and being able to go full send every day in our personal
Hmm.
lives and have the capacity to do that, because the white space for that stuff is just as important as that
Yeah.
meeting you may or may not set up.
Hmm. Yeah, you can't fill your calendar with back-to-back meetings with various people throughout the entire week. Just not sustainable. But it does go back to the theme of you and I both planning and working toward removing ourselves from day-to-day client work so we can start to focus on the business and not be in the business, because a lot of these connections in community, they lead to sales, they lead to new introductions, they lead to learning opportunities. So it's really important to work through these things and actually see how we can turn that into new clients and new sales for us.
It it's one thing where I think firm owners, business owners in general, tend to over invest in things that they can quantify. So you can quantify an investment in, paid advertising, because you see how many
Hmm.
clicks you get on your website. You can see that funnel. And so people are like, I'm going to pay for this all day because I can measure it. I can see
Hmm.
the impact of it. And business owners tend to underinvest in things where they cannot quantify the ROI. And these are the types of things that we're talking about, where it is very difficult to quantify an ROI on our, like, monetary spend or our time investment. But
Hmm.
I'm a firm believer that relationships certainly do keep things going and create momentum and provide a lot of opportunity, but it's so hard to measure.
I mean, we got someone saw my LinkedIn post about the fall bash. It was a perfect client alignment. And they're like, "Hey, I thought your company name was cool and you guys seem like you know what you're doing." So they reached out and didn't expect that. And it was a really great conversation. But yeah, I think there's a lot of intangibles that we won't be able to tie back to specific initiatives. But we're going to keep doing it. We're going to keep being involved. We're going to keep keeping like that happiness for ourselves and just the feeling of community and network,
Hmm.
for as long as we can, which hopefully is in our plan for the future.
Yeah, and I think, we'll go back to culture and values again,
Yeah.
but I feel like doubling down on things like that we feel a very strong conviction in, creates this effervescence of, like, it's bubbling up, and it's creating these different touch points that we can't see right now, because it's just like it's
Hmm.
simmering, and
Below
there's an
the surface.
attractiveness to that. And so
Hmm.
by leaning into those intangibles, those values, those ethos items, there will be a tail to that, and we have no idea what that looks like today. And I have a feeling that it will be much richer, much fuller in the long run.
You get what you give.
And we want to give a lot. We want to give a lot to the industry, to our team, to our clients. This is not about us. It's not about the Feldman Villard CPA group. Like there's a reason why it's Full Send. And
Sounds dirty.
I know. Yeah.
Well, great. I'm excited about it. I think in the next probably 6 months, we have some really great opportunities to look forward to. A couple advisory councils, a couple trade shows, new employee growth. We got a good 6 months ahead of us here.
Yeah, we'll have some exciting announcements about partner advisory councils that we're participating in here in the upcoming year. Speaking engagements. I'll be at Connect this year speaking, which is going to be super fun.
I'll be listening.
Yeah, you will be there, and you'll be participating in community and meeting all these people, and it's going to be so fun. But a lot more to come on that front.
Can't wait.
Cool. Well, that's our high level on community and participation through our relationships. Thanks for joining. If you want to find us, you can find us at fullsendfinance.com or on LinkedIn at Stacey Feldman, CPA, or Roman Villard, CPA.
Adios.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Building in the Wild. If you found value in our conversation, we'd appreciate a review on Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. To stay up to date, make sure to hit that subscribe button. For more insights and additional information, our YouTube is at Full Send Finance, and our website is fullsendfinance.com. Remember, the business landscape may be wild, but you don't have to navigate it alone. Build together, go further. Until next time.